Thanks for coming out to tonight's December Mobile Monday event. This is a great event we have to wrap up the year. It's been an exciting year. A lot of great things have happened for the chapter in terms of sponsors coming on board, and we've done some fantastic events. I'd like to thank the Mars team, the AV team, and the video team for always doing the fantastic job. We have all of our events online at Vimeo, so certainly check that out if you can. But thanks Janet and Alan and Peter, Andrea, Don, and Jeff, and I didn't catch the new video person's name, but usually it's Anna, but thank you. If you want to follow us on Twitter, it's Momo Toronto. If you're tweeting at the event, it's #MomoTO. I'd like to thank the sponsors. Miller Thomson came on board this fall, which is fantastic. I'm not sure if anyone from Miller Thomson is here tonight. I know Anthony wasn't able to attend. Is anyone else here from Miller Thomson? But they're a great go-to team if you're either setting up a company or you have a company and you want to get some good corporate advice and you're looking at patents or protection around your intellectual property, so they're a good group to work with. Nokia spoke at the October event, and they have a great developer conference, global conference, great opportunity to win some money and have your applications featured globally. So thanks Chad and team. TELUS came on board as well in the last month, and they've brought a pretty big contingent here tonight, so thank you to TELUS, to An and Peter and Scott and Atish, Tanya, and Grant. We have some new sponsorship announcements. Tony Lacaver from Wind is coming on board as a sponsor. He's been a real big supporter since end of 2008 when we actually did our inaugural event here at Mars, and he helped pull out a fantastic crowd that night, and it's been a great momentum ever since then, so thank you, Tony, for that. We have BDC Ventures who've come on board to sponsor the chapter, so thank you to them and Charlotte and team. Redney Lucas was one of our speakers in April 2009, and he gave a great story on how he started the company 10 years ago, all the way from inception to having a publicly traded company on the TSX. Also the CWTA, they've been with us since I think year number 2, and they're a great supporter. MarketWire, which helps us out with our news releases, and Dundane Multimedia, which helps us with our website. We also have Rogers Wireless, who joined on board as a sponsor in October, and we have Larry Bazu here, a director in the new product launch division that'll give us an overview of a Catalyst program that they have, so take her away, Larry.
Well, thanks, Jim. It's really great to be here representing Rogers and helping to sponsor some of these gatherings we come to. So just quickly, I am Larry Bazu, like Jim said. I work in the new product development team for Rogers, and I'm going to talk to you today about some exciting stuff we just brought out regarding the Rogers Catalyst beta program. So I'm going to go quickly through this. I only got a few minutes. Jim's got the clock on me here. So over the last couple of years, Rogers has been coming out to a lot of developer events, hackathons, meetups to find out, what really helps drive the developer community and how can we better help out. So some of the quick learnings we had, really long time to market with a carrier, 6-8 months, lots of business development activity. Developers really don't have a lot of access into some of the hidden value that's in the network, the location capability, voicemail calling capability, and it's actually a long time to complex integration. And one of the things that's very expensive to get these connectivity fees, if you talk about some of the proprietary APIs and virtual VPN networks and all of that detail you need, very costly to get there. So what we wanted to say is that through all of this learning, we wanted to say things have changed with the announcement of what we did at the beginning of November, Rogers Catalyst beta program. And Rogers Catalyst beta program is a website that's aimed at the developer community for developers. And it basically gives you access to Rogers Cloud services, billing, location SMS services. It also gives you standard developer APIs, the things that developers want. There's RESTful APIs, there's SOAP APIs, no more complicated telco-specific APIs where you have to learn new tools or skill sets. It also allows you to do an online portal to onboard and go through your business development program fairly quickly with some standard stuff I'll talk to quickly later on. There's a live sandbox where you get to play. And the live sandbox is not just for testing, but it's really live traffic on the network, and you can basically gain access within 5 minutes to get into the sandbox, and you're up and running to test out your applications. So Rogers Catalyst, as we bring this out, our cloud APIs really bring 3 APIs in its first rendition here. There's SOAP, cloud-based RESTful APIs, nothing new there. You expect that sort of stuff in your developer programs. It's aligned with, in the sort of the GSMA world, the GSMA 1 API standard. 1 API stands for Open Network Enablers, not 1 API for everyone to use. And then finally, more APIs are going to come on board as we work with the developer community, and here's some of the feedback, what they want to add on. So just a quick overview of Rogers Billing. What it really brings to you is the ability to place charges on the carrier bill and commercialize what you want to do. It's a path to revenue for you. It's very simple on-the-fly price points. It allows you to pick your price point. They're not a few fixed ones. It allows an advice of charge mechanism. You can pop up a message to the customer to let them know they're buying something. And then finally, no more sort of short codes. If you've been in the short code business, you have a sort of a period of time before you can get a short code, and they're fixed price points. So the next API we'll talk about is just quickly location. The key thing here, it's not just GPS location, it's location of any Rogers phone across the network, across Canada. Okay, and it also works if we're in this room and you're using the API, we could find your phones down here, and even though you don't have any visibility to any satellites up here. The location works indoors, and then finally it has an opt-in mechanism. There's a built-in advice of privacy API built in, so you can ask the customer, are you allowing access to your location to this application? Do you want to do it one time for all time? And then there's a reminder that you've opted into some of those things to keep you current, so you can help track your location. The next one really talks to the last API, which is the SMS API. It's not just send SMS, it's receive. So you get to do both send and receive. So the key thing here is if you've done SMS integration before, no more complicated SMPP integration, and is it version 3, version 4? How do I go back and forth and get VPNs up and running? It gives you the ability to use simple SOAP requests to send SMS, receive SMS. It allows you to get SMS delivery receipts now, so you can get some reliability there. And then finally, instant shortcode provisioning. There's a list in the platform. You can start to pick your shortcodes on the fly rather than a complicated delay having to wait for your shortcodes. So that's really, from a developer perspective, half the story. You got your APIs. They're now RESTful. They're open standards the way you would expect them to be. But one of the other things we heard is the business models. We've simplified the business models for you. Working with us, when you're working for location SMS, there's a simple monthly invoicing process. People with high volumes get sort of a tiered volume package discount. And then on the billing side, you get access right to do billing API. And as you expect, we're not changing anything. Standard 70-30 split, exactly what you would expect from doing sort of download and billing with the carrier. Onboarding process is pretty easy. Registration in the sandbox only takes about 5 minutes, and you have access to live network traffic through a shared sort of private whitelist you can create. And then finally, once you've tested your app and played with a couple of phones and you really want to go commercial, there's a very simple workflow process you go through to request to go commercial on the network. A few steps rather than 6 to 8 months of what I would call business development, and a lot of golf games, I think, is what Jim is telling me here. So ample development resources that you expect, all the things you expect from a developer forums, support forums, API documentation. The sample code you want, it's all online. And to get involved, just go up to rogerscatalyst.com, gain access to the sandbox, use the credits that are in there so you can start testing SMS and location and billing, and go ahead and launch your service. And that's really all I want to do today, is quickly give you an overview, and I wanted to thank Jim for giving us a few minutes to talk to you before you get into the rest of the day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Larry, and thanks, Will, from Rogers as well, sitting with Larry. How many people were here a year ago? Okay, so we have a few people here. If you recall, Tony spoke a year ago. At that time, there was a question in market whether he'd be actually able to launch with a CRTC, I guess, injection, or how would you call it? CRTC objection. Yeah. Anyways, there was a little bit of a controversy in market as to foreign ownership and that type of thing. So there was a question as to whether he'd be able to launch. And it was actually a week after our event that he was given permission from Tony Clement to launch in market. And throughout the course of this year, of course, there were other players in market that launched, like Alex company, Public Mobile, Mobilicity launched as well. And it really changed the market a lot in terms of offers that you saw from existing carriers and obviously the incoming carriers. So it really changed it for the better. Consumers are getting great value now. And we wanted to have a panel that kind of highlighted the whole market dynamics. So we had a call to the market leaders of each of the carriers, and we asked them to participate in the panel. RCR Wireless, Jeff Mucci is moderating the panel. So with us today we have Alec and Tony from Public Mobile and Win Mobile respectively. So I'll give you a little bit of a highlight on their bios, and then we'll start right into the panel discussion. So Tony is a top 40 under 40 winner previously. He's the chairman and CEO of Global Live and chairman of Win Mobile. He also owns Yak Communications, that's under the Global Live banner, One Connect Services, Canopco Hospitality Telecom, and Global Live Carrier Services. He's also actively involved in a charity foundation that he set up called the Shamba Foundation. He's also a participant in U of T's program, the Next 36, which is a program focused on identifying and nurturing the next generation entrepreneurs in Canada. Alec is the CEO of Public Mobile. Previously, he was the president of Bell Mobility and Bell Distribution, Inc., responsible for $4 billion in revenue and 5.5 million subscribers. He also acted as the Bell Canada Chief Marketing Officer, responsible for all the consumer business, including Bell Canada, Bell Mobility, ExpressView, and Simpatico. He was also the driving force behind the launch of Bell Vanguard, which was a company responsible for creating low-cost operating model for BC and looking at international opportunities for the company in wireless and VoIP. Before joining Bell, the Bell family, he was senior vice president at Rogers Cable, responsible for sales and marketing, and held multiple executive positions at Rogers during his time there. He's a graduate of U of T, and he started his career at Motorola, and he is also a top 40 under 40 winner in the year 2002. On our moderation, for our moderation tonight, we have Jeff Mucci. He's the publisher of RCR Wireless. He's also the managing partner of Arden Operating Company and Telecom Careers CEO. Just a little bit about him and his background. He's on the board of directors of, He's served many leadership roles, including board of directors, chairman, CEO, president of multiple companies that are funded by private equity organizations. He's managed to raise over $300 million in debt and equity for some of these companies previously, and he's managed companies with over $100 million in sales and 450 employees. He's got a great background in the competitive landscape around telecom, managing a couple of CLECs. He's also a graduate of Clemson University with a Bachelor of Science in Financial Management. So let's give a round of applause to Alec, Anthony, and Jeff.
Want to be in the middle? Or?
How do you want us organized? You want to keep us apart, or?
No wrestling. I just want to clarify. Most of us that win top 40 under 40 were like 39 when we win it. I think Tony was like 29 when he won. He's still under 40. So there you go.
Well, thank you for having us, Jim. It's great to be here again. I love coming to Toronto, even in the winter. Our format tonight is going to be really broken down in a couple different areas. Number one, we're going to talk about the companies and the backgrounds of the CEOs. We're going to go into policy, and then we'll get into the fun part of day-to-day operations, which includes building and operating these networks, and talk a little bit about the advertising and marketing and products. So at the end, we'll do Q&A. You'll notice we have 2 microphones set up. At the Q&A portion, we'd ask you to come up to the mic, introduce yourself, and then either ask the question of the group or individuals directly. So without any further ado, let's get started. But Jim, how much time do we have? 45 minutes, okay. So a little background on the CEOs. We couldn't have 2 different backgrounds. One is corporate Canadian companies, and the other one's the, I guess, the epitome of entrepreneurship. So the question I have for you is maybe talk a little bit about your role models. Who do you hold up as a leader that you're trying to exemplify and follow in their footsteps? And we'll start maybe with you, Alex.
Well, other than Tony, the serial, in all seriousness, I think a lot of people, I got a lot of emails from folks saying, hey, I'm going to come see the event because I hear you and Tony are going to go at it. I don't think people realize how close Tony and I are and how aligned we are actually on a lot of that stuff. Look, I think as far as role models, probably I would say Ted Rogers. And ironically, I wouldn't have said it when I was spending a decade working for him because he could be a pretty tough guy. But no question in my mind, after I spent a bunch of years at Bell, I really started to appreciate who Ted Rogers was and the brilliance that he had. I mean, he understood it was about getting the customer and keeping the customer. The rest of it will take care of itself. Not at all costs, but getting the customer. He was also somebody who understood that there was always a way to get something done, and he didn't have a lot of time for bureaucracy. So I would say, no question, in doing a startup now, I find myself with my management team, and look, my management team, some of them came from Bell, some came from TELUS, and some came from Rogers. And the guys from Rogers say to me, it's ironic that you quote Ted now. And I do things that I thought Ted was crazy to do, like walking around with a floor plan, deciding where people are going to sit. I remember once seeing Ted coming by my office, and he didn't have any shoes on, and he just walked up, and he's got this floor plan. And I looked at him, and I said, what are you doing? You're not even the CEO of the operating company, you're the CEO of the holding company, and you're deciding where people are going to sit. And about 6 months ago, I found myself doing the same thing. And I thought, have I lost it? And I realized the reason I was doing it was, as our business was growing, people were starting to worry about, did they have access to natural light in a window, and did they sit near the kitchen, and all these irrelevant things. But when the guy who started the company, the guy in charge, says, no, this is where you're going to sit, nobody seems to balk at it. So that's why Ted was doing it. And Ted built an incredible empire in the face of a lot of adversity. So I would say, without question, Ted Rogers.
Tony?
I think for me, I certainly am the type of person, I believe everyone has something to offer. So I people that know me well, I think, would say that I listen a lot to people, and I think over the years have had a lot of, when I was a really young entrepreneur, I was fortunate enough to have some investors that taught me a lot early on in my career, and supported me even in the dot-com bust. Supported me on the way up and supported me on the way down. And I maintain a close relationship with them, and just recently, as this morning, had a coffee with one of them and learned something again this morning. So I think it's for entrepreneurs and for corporate leaders like Alec, who's now an entrepreneur. You learn something from people all the time. I had dinner with Alec before coming here and learned 5 things. I got him drunk, so he would share more than he wanted to. So, I think it's really about keeping an open mind, because you can learn something great from everyone you encounter. So,
Good. Well, let's talk a little bit about, before we get into the details of your companies, maybe from a high level, talk about your company in terms of scope of operations, which markets, number of subs, to the extent you can disclose revenue, just to give people perspective on your operations. And Tony, we'll start with you.
Sure. So Global Live is a telecom company that I started in 1998, and it built up really over the years under the radar of the big guys. And it got to us, so it was in a consumer long distance market with a brand called Yak Communications, business segment with a business called One Connect, and Canopco selling services to hotels and hospitals. And we do a bunch of things from internet service, home phone service, long distance, and a bunch of value-added software applications for businesses in hospitality, like, for example, email hosting, these types of things that business customers are looking for. And about 2006, I got to the size where the big guys were starting to really come after us, even though we were a very small company by their metrics. They really started to come after us. So I sort of had a decision point, 2007, late 2006, 2007 timeframe, where it was like, sort of go big or go home. And meaning really, go home meaning sell the company to one of them. And fortunately, the government created the set aside for wireless, and so the opportunity opened itself up to go after a big investment for the purposes of building new infrastructure, and so I picked that road. The book is out, whether I'm right or not. Might have been a happier life if I had sold the business 2 years ago. And no, I'm joking. That's not my personality at all. But that's really so. The business today has those businesses that were, over the years I built up, servicing residential consumers across Canada. And in that business, the Act Communications business is in all markets in Canada, all provinces and territories. And sells predominantly long distance still, but has now diversified into home phone and internet, and working on IPTV for that business. And in the business segment, we sell typically LAN, WAN. We do a LAN, WAN consultation, then we'll go in and sell a bunch of hardware and services. And of course, Wind is selling predominantly to younger demographic today. As we roll out the network and make the network more robust, we'll go into offering a business offering, but today it's focused on the consumer segment and doing quite well. We're really ramping the sub acquisition up, but still a long way to go, obviously, to make it a success.
Okay, so Wind, it's national footprint?
Wind is in Toronto, Calgary, Edmonton, Ottawa, and Vancouver. So it's in the 5 large English-speaking markets in Canada. And the goal in 2011 is to roll it out, and to expand what we call the Wind home zones. And it's really about making Canada a local market. That's our MO on this, is like, let's make Canada one big local market for mobile. There's no roaming, there's no long distance.
Okay. Number of employees, roughly?
Wind has, the Global Live is about 1,500 employees. Wind has got 900 something employees.
Okay. Alec?
We're a little bit less diversified. We're a pure wireless play, very focused at going after the unserved segment. So Public Mobile is aimed at the working class Canadian that lives paycheck to paycheck, that today doesn't have a cell phone. They may have had one, but they can't really afford the unpredictable billing that comes from the incumbents, where you sign up for a $30 or $40 a month rate plan and it ends up being $70 or $80. And most of the people in this room, you pay it. You don't like the sticker shock, you get angry, but you pay it. But I grew up in a working class family in the East End of Toronto, and if something was budgeted, it got paid, and if it wasn't budgeted, you just didn't do it. So Public Mobile is really aimed at simple, easy to use handsets. We have a simple talk and text model. We don't actually offer anything that isn't done on a flat rate basis. So everything you buy from us, long distance included, is flat rate. And if we can't offer it on a flat rate basis, well, we don't offer it. Now that'll change eventually, but right now that we believe is the right thing to do for our customers. We've really focused on 2 markets. We're in Toronto. We launched in June, or I guess late May, June, and we launched Montreal as well. We're opening up, the adjacent cities sort of every month. So Mississauga was last month. This month we opened Brampton. Oakville is around the corner, and we'll be down to Hamilton, and then we'll go east to Oshawa, and then we'll end up going north to Barrie, doing the same kind of strategy in Montreal. Real focus on our own distribution. There's roughly 100 Public Mobile exclusive points of distribution, meaning there are stores or our kiosks in malls. We've done a deal with some interesting partners like Gateway Newsstands. There's actually a Gateway just outside the door here, and if you notice, they've got about 160 locations. It's closed, you can't buy it. I wasn't trying to get them to go buy it.
He's opening it up later.
It'll be open, there'll be special deals. We're going to offer today only the Wind pricing by Public Mobile. That's joke. So Gateway was a very interesting one for us, in that they're in the subways. They're where our demographic live, work, and play. And it wasn't just a distribution deal, it's a co-branding deal. So the Gateway Newsstands are now called Public Mobile, or Gateway Public Mobile. So we're very excited about that deal, and that's another 160 locations. We're in Loblaws, and we've seen, I've been at this game my whole career, and I managed the distribution when I was at Rogers. I did it at Bell, and it's really where you're going to start to see dividends getting paid, and we've started to see it. I mean, and it started off, and you try to get that daily run rate. You get 100 sales per day, and then you get to 200 and 300, and it was a big day when we broke 1,000 a day, and you're starting to be a real business then. So we don't talk about how many subscribers we have. We'd like to be a little bit under the radar screen on that, but I sleep at night, so it's good.
And how many employees do you have?
At head office, we've got about 130, and we probably have maybe another 140 in our retail shops. Because some of them are our shops, and some of them, they might be a public mobile store. You can't tell the difference, but they might be run by an independent dealer, and so I don't count that staff. Okay. So we're a smaller operation.
Good. So we're going to move into policy. Before I get into policy, I want to just ask for folks in the audience to show of hands. I want to get a feel for who's in the audience. How many folks here work for a carrier? Maybe 20%. How many folks work with an equipment manufacturer, OEM? Maybe a dozen or so. And then how many folks are with application or development companies, software companies? Good, good. So let's switch into policy. I come from Austin, Texas, and the reason I like coming up here is because this is a truly competitive market. You had a bunch of incumbents, or three incumbents that really didn't want competition. This is our perception. And after a bunch of rankling, all of a sudden you got some upstarts, and one of the newspapers called you guys what do you call it, scallywags? I think that was the term. So I like coming up here because you guys are mixing it up a little bit, and policy generally drives investment. You guys are indicative of the investment that's been made in Spectrum. You've hired people, you're starting to create customers, so you're generating economic growth is what I like to look at it, but it all starts with policy. So I'd like to get your thoughts on the Canadian broadband or wireless policy and what could be done better. Alec?
Well, I think they did a good job in terms of creating some set-aside spectrum. I think the government is sending a message to the incumbents, and they have been for a few years, and I think that message was largely ignored, and that was it's time that Canada come out of the dark ages in terms of wireless penetration. Folks, out of the top 30 industrialized countries in this world, Canada is in 30th place in terms of wireless penetration. And we're tied with Turkey and Mexico. Nothing wrong with Turkey and Mexico, but I think we're a bit more advanced and we should have a lot more wireless penetration. Broadband penetration, by contrast, at one point Canada was second in the world, second only to Korea. What's the difference? Well, the difference is you had pure competition, DSL versus cable, prices got driven down, and all of a sudden penetration went up. We have the lowest penetration in the free world. We have the highest price per minute in the free world. So there's a correlation. It's pretty straightforward. And I think the government is tired of that. And look, the wireless operators in this country, and I was one of them. I mean, we were enjoying EBITDA margins, in the low to mid 40s, and now they've hit 50%. Rogers reported a 50% EBITDA at one point. And that's just not, it's great if you're a shareholder, but it's just not normal and sustainable. And so I think the policy in Canada has evolved. I think Tony Clement has done a great job, and look, we all on any one given issue can be on on opposite sides, and another issue be aligned. I think what Tony Clement has done in terms of pushing forward competition is a great thing, and we don't always have to agree on how it's done, but fundamentally competition is good. So you've seen prices come down as a result of new entrants. What do they need to do going forward? Well, they've just asked for opinions on what to do in the 700 megahertz auction. And we sat down with some of the folks from Industry Canada, and they said, so do you think there should be set-aside spectrum? And, and what percentage? And we don't think there should be a percentage set aside. I actually think, and I would argue, that Canadians would benefit if the entire 700 megahertz band was entirely set aside. In fact, I don't think that Rogers, Bell, or Telus should be allowed to go into the next auction. Now, before you take that as a sort of an aggressive, what did you call it, scallywags, or what that guy called us, comment, here's the reality. It's all about where do you want to end up sort of in the long run. Now, if you're a new entrant, and look, I was the incumbent for a lot of years, the way you hurt and eventually get rid of new entrants is you take away the two things they need. The two lifeblood items are spectrum and capital. So we're going out and getting our capital, but the government has to take these new entrants, and like a baby, like an infant, it needs to be nurtured. And so we need to be fed, and our mother's milk is spectrum. So we need the 700 megahertz band to be completely set aside. And if you sort of say, yeah, but is that fair? Because I've always said it should be a level playing field. It is about leveling the playing field. If you look at what the early indicators are as part of this solicitation for information, I think Industry Canada is going to do a really good thing. I think they're going to force the incumbents to once and for all sit down and create a spreadsheet that says, show me all the spectrum you own. And then show me which of it actually has any traffic on it. And guess what you're going to find? Squatters, hoarders, you name the term. Those are too aggressive. I'm a shy guy. I'd never say those things. But these
I commissioned this survey, by the way. I commissioned this survey, so I'll share it with you.
Well, I'll tell you.
We got them.
These guys are going to all of a sudden be called on it. The spectrum they've bought, they're buying, and they don't care.
Buying or just getting it, half of it. It's given to them a lot.
Well, they were given it to it initially, and in the last auction, in the set-aside, we all bought spectrum. How much spectrum was purchased in the non-set-aside by a non-incumbent? Answer, zero. How much was paid? We all spent a lot of money buying spectrum. They spent even more to keep us out of the non-set-aside. In fact, the only band of non-set-aside that was bought was the stuff we bought, and people overlooked it.
But they still split with the non-set-aside. They split it basically evenly between themselves, which is the classic, classic oligopoly move.
So these guys each spent roughly $1 billion keeping people out of getting that spectrum. And how much of that spectrum has been deployed? We're all deploying our spectrum. Rogers, Bell, and Telus, how much of the AWS spectrum that they bought have they deployed? None. Zero.
But they're saying they need more spectrum originally.
They need more.
Running these LTE trials saying, oh, we're spectrum starved, we need so much more. Haven't even touched the AWS stuff yet.
It's at the point where on spectrum they're obese. They've been breastfed till the age of 12 and they want more. It's just wrong.
So
there shouldn't be.
I think we got a good feel
You
for
get-
how
you
you
get a
feel
feel
about
for
the policy.
All right.
Let's give Tony a chance. If you had to say one or two things about how you feel about the policy and what should be changed, what would it
Well,
be?
I echo everything Alex said, except about the breastfeeding. I didn't like that analogy. But they, look, okay, so we, maybe since Alex was talking kind of higher level, I'll talk sort of tactically maybe. There's a few things we have. One is we're obviously very upset that we've been unsuccessful at sharing any towers with the big guys. The government mandated tower sharing. And of course, there's an arbitration process and the policy is clear. We have not successfully shared any towers with any of the big guys. And they've come up with all sorts of technical reasons of why this is not possible. And yet, of course, Bell and Telus share towers between themselves, on a regular basis, shared the whole HSPA, rollout and so on. So, I really think it's just a lot of BS.
So it's more than the spectrum.
Yeah, well, look, yeah, exactly, it is more than the spectrum, but this is a government, you're asking about government policy, so it's a government policy issue. They need to enforce that policy and create, either economic incentives to share or disincentives, penalties if you don't share. So, that's got to happen. On the roaming, anytime someone leaves the wind coverage area, the incumbents drop our call. It's the only one of the only jurisdictions in the world that doesn't have a seamless handoff between carriers. So they drop our call, which is known as a hard handoff. So our customer experiences a dropped call, and our customer has to call back in order to be able to start roaming. And of course, then they use that and market against us, saying we have more dropped calls than they do. And fortunately, the Competition Bureau last month called them to task on that and has sued Rogers for this action. So we'd like to see the government enforce a very simple thing. Seamless handoff and roaming is just common everywhere around the world. We'd like to see that implemented. So cut the crap, cut the anti-competitive behavior, and penalize them for anti-competitive behavior. This is what needs to happen. And if you don't like the idea of penalizing, you don't like if you're a more positive person, not a negative person. And then provide economic incentives to behave and cooperate. And there's a whole lot of things that the big guys need from the regulator. So if you said, hey, look, we'll give you this concession, this concession, this concession, but we want a competitive market in wireless, so cut the games. I'm sure they're all very, very smart guys running great businesses. As Alex said, great margins. They're not that didn't happen by accident. They're very, very smart operators, which is why they're so aggressive at taking advantage of every regulatory loophole they can find.
One more comment on spectrum. How much spectrum do each of you have? And then in terms of megahertz channel capacity, and then with the surge in data, do you have enough spectrum to keep up with smartphones and video and all the sorts of things that are happening around the world with smartphones and 3G and 4G?
Yeah, no, I don't think. I mean, I'll speak on myself, but we don't have enough, and which is why again the government's got to support us in this next auction, or we're just going to get squeezed out. And of course, the big guys are pushing for the auction to happen as fast as possible. Why do they want it as fast as possible? Well, the new entrants just spent all this money on spectrum. We're just getting started. We haven't got our operations, robust on a good track yet. So for us now to go into another auction is challenging. Well, these guys can afford to subsidize and play defense, and freeze us out if there's no set aside. So.
Alan?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is we need more spectrum in the long run, especially as data usage increases. We are launching data early in the new year, and we chose, because we only had 10 megahertz like Tony and the rest of the new entrants, we chose to go with CDMA because CDMA gives us a great voice and text and data path to start with, but within 10 megahertz, we can actually launch LTE. The problem is, you can launch LTE, but to really make it robust, you need a lot more spectrum. So we're all in the same boat. I mean, it's lifeblood.
And just to give perspective, T-Mobile in the U.S., clearly they're a second-tier player relative to AT&T and Verizon. I think they have 30 megahertz of spectrum. And based on the trends in data usage, it simply is not enough today. So you guys are trying to be an upstart with 10 megahertz of spectrum, flying in the face of rolling out smartphones and data plans. It's simply, it's just not going to work. So I appreciate the set-aside comments. Let's move to day-to-day. Actually, another interesting comment on, I guess, policy. Net neutrality in applications like Netflix. What are your views on managing consumers wanting to download what they want when they want?
Well, I mean, again, I guess what I'd say on that is that obviously we're proponents of net neutrality. Being a smaller player in the market, there's advantages for us to have net neutrality really. But again, I go back to a comment I made on the earlier side, which is enforcement. I mean, it doesn't really matter what policies come out here if the CRTC does not have the teeth to enforce and incentivize the big guys, as I said, or disincentive them with penalties. Then what do we? It doesn't really matter what we have as the regulatory framework because guys are just going to do what they're going to do. And if we get into 3-year, 5-year proceedings at the CRTC, which has happened in the past, which has happened around the CLEC time, it wasn't until 03, 04 that the tariffs really were favorable for unbundled loops and so on and all the elements of CLEC. And of course, it ended up being Rogers, Shaw, Eastlink, the guys who were already established, that ended up benefiting from those tariffs as they introduced their home phone products. And all the new guys that started in 98, 99, 2000, were all gone. So, I mean, we need, if we're going to do, whatever the policy is, whatever we agree is right, then it has to be enforced.
Yeah, look, I think there is going to be a lot of issues like this one that are going to be spun and levered by the incumbents, and it won't stop. I think if you look at the last decade, left to their own devices, penetration didn't increase, it stayed pretty static. ARPU went up, profits went up. I think now you're starting to see them all buying media properties. Now, why do you think they're buying media properties? Because they believe somehow they're going to be able to lever that content into an advantage, and they're going to want to make it exclusive content. You want to watch this, you got to buy a device and a service from me. And I think at the end of the day, that's just that doesn't work. So look, I'm a big believer in everything that possible should be done on open standards, and go from there. But I think Tony's right. I think all the regulations are great, but the fact that we haven't shared a single tower, neither does Tony, and I don't think Mobilicity has, says something about how, how well the guys are playing fair, and they're not.
And for folks who haven't had the experience of building and operating networks, what impact does not having the ability to share towers have on your business?
Well, yeah, I mean, it changes you have to build everything on your own, so it takes longer. Getting the permits, it's very challenging to get permits, and of course we end up looking like the bad guys because we're going into a community and getting permits to build a tower where no one likes. Aesthetically, they're ugly. There's environmental impact. People are concerned about health and safety issues. So, we get a lot of resistance. It takes time. There's logistics to build it, cost, and then of course the capital picture goes up dramatically, which restricts the flexibility in our business model to still offer a very competitive offering. And of course then getting investment. Like Alec made the point of the capital you need becomes a lot bigger, a lot faster, in order to actually have a successful model. So,
and look, I mean, my point on this is, when I was an incumbent, I was on the operations side, so I wasn't, looking over the regulatory strategy. But I think people play the game hard, and I think telecom in Canada is the big leagues of, screw over everybody for the sake of profit, and especially new entrants, anybody that would dare try to compete. I think the rules were pretty clear. In 2007, the auction rules came down and they said there will be tower sharing. So what does tower sharing mean? You've built a tower, and we in good faith have to negotiate with you, if you're an incumbent, to put our antenna up there. So what do you think happened between the end of '07, when the rules were written, and mid-08, when the auction was over? And you don't notice this unless somebody points it out to you, but every single tower up Highway 400, the 404, every tower owned by the incumbents went from being a tower with one antenna array, a triangular antenna array on top, to all of a sudden 3 antenna arrays. They just crowded the tower. And they did that to say, we're building our future capacity now. Well, who on earth spends capital on antennas that aren't activated, right? And then when we come along, they're like, good to see you, Alec. Yeah, we got space. I know the tower's 100 feet tall, but we got room for you at the 12-foot level. Not a lot of coverage from 12 feet, but come on in. And then, it's like, the structural integrity of that tower is at 99%. We're going to need you to pay to rebuild the entire tower. Come on, right? Play by the rules, guys. Just a little color on it.
We want to save some time for questions, but I do want to hit, and just in the paper, I've been reading about how difficult the Canadian contracts are that make it difficult for people to switch. Maybe can you guys talk about contracts, consumer contracts, and cost of plans and what options are really available to
Well, I think you can ask everyone, how does everyone feel about the early termination fee in their contracts? show of hands.
Show of hands that like the termination fees?
Who hates the early termination fee?
But how hard is it to switch from one carrier to another today?
Well, this is one of the hurdles, right? The early termination fees. I mean, people are locked into all sorts of punitive contract terms. It's like more difficult than buying a car. Like your cell phone contract is more onerous than your car lease. That's how crazy it's gotten. So that's a challenge. And for us, we're offering a lot of incentives to try to ease the burden, take the pain away from people trying to switch. But it's still it's a huge problem.
Yeah, look, I think the contracts, everybody hates them, but you all go out and sign them over and over, right? So, what do you call a guy who beats his head against the wall continually, right? So why do you do it? You do it because you don't want to spend $450 for a BlackBerry Bold 9700. You want to spend $199 or $99, which is probably what it's at today. So the incumbents subsidize that phone for you, lure you in, you get hooked and you use the phone. And the problem is, probably the contract's not so bad. It's that they've really pushed the envelope and gone to 3-year contracts, and the life of the phone's probably only 1.5 years or 2 years. And then when you try to get out, it's not a fair penalty. So I think they've been a little too aggressive on that stuff. And I think there are people who will sign contracts and are fine with it, and they'll stay with the incumbents. God bless. I think there's other people who want to sort of, work with a new entrant and not have a contract, and it's going to take time. And again, this is where I think the rules have to be enforced, as Tony says, and things have to be nurtured, because we do need to get to that critical mass And what's that critical mass? Is it 500,000 subs, a million subs? We've got to get there. And so I think the incumbents are now looking at how much money can they spend to come to you 6 months before the end of your contract and say to you, we'll give you this fancy new handset. Look at this, but don't worry about what it says here. Forget that. Look at the fancy new handset, and we'll give it to you for a great price. Stay with us for another 3 years. And I think some of you will, and hopefully some of you won't. And you know, if you want a smartphone, go see Tony. And if you want a really good basic talk and text phone at a great price, come see me, and we'll take care of you.
Fair enough. There's been a little talk about advertising claims and Better Business Bureau of late. Either one of you guys want to comment on what's going on there behind the scenes or actually in the newspapers?
Well,
In 1 minute or less.
we've got a lot of time, don't we? Look, it's a tough game, right? We're not going to cry. We play the game, and I think the regulator has got some teeth, and the folks at the Competition Bureau, Industry Canada, the CRTC are saying enough. And so Rogers came out and said, you know, we're going to launch Chatter. What possessed them is beyond me. But you know what? I guarantee you, here's my prediction. A senior executive will lose his job over this one sometime in the next 12 months because it was a dumbass move. You know, they didn't need to do it. And then if you want to do it and erode your own margins, go for it. But to then go a step further, and this is where you sort of, you know, see the bully mentality, and say, we're going to launch Chatter, and our entire campaign, just think about this, folks. We're not going to define for millions, tens of millions of people in this country what Chatter is. We're not going to try to tell you what we do, what our products are, what our services are. Where have you ever, I mean, anytime any of you are making an investment in a CEO and a management team who says, my advertising campaign is to bash the other guy, never tell anybody about my new brand, that's just lunacy. And that's what they did. They came out with an advertising campaign that simply said, fewer dropped calls than all the other new guys. That's me and Tony. Like, just think about that for a minute. Does that sound like somebody who's trying to, in a bona fide way, in good faith, grow their business? No. Well, guess what? They really, I'm trying to think of a politically correct term here, but I can't. So you know what? They really crapped on this one, because what they did was they forgot to check how many drop calls they actually have. They just assumed our networks were bad. When the Competition Bureau came, I'm sure they did it with you and they did it with us, they looked at all our drop calls. And guess what they found out? They found out we had fewer drop calls than those guys. I got to tell you, I still run with the Rogers BlackBerry because we don't offer a BlackBerry. I'm dropping calls all the time. I don't know if you guys are, but it's a gong show. It is a gong show right now. So the Competition Bureau said, we're going to fine you $10 million. You're going to cease and desist on your advertising. And then they went out and hired probably the most brilliant litigation firm, other than Miller Thompson, who's one of the sponsors, in this country. In this country. And they've hired those guys to now go after them in court. So, yeah, they crossed the line. And you know what? It's great. I think, you know, Tony and his team did a great job of making everybody aware of it. You know, we all did our part, and it'll be interesting. But just play fair, guys. Play fair.
Any comments on advertising?
No, it was fantastic to see them get slapped around a little bit, you know. They've been bullying us like crazy for a couple of years, so it was like, you know, it was great. And as Alex said, when the stats came out, that was beautiful. I mean, the stats came out, and in fact, they had more drop calls than we did, which is just awesome to see, you know. And I, you know, again, I have all the respect in the world for them as operators. They run great businesses, but go too far when you're bullying. You know, it's like the classic scenario, the big kid in the schoolyard kicking the little kid, you know. That's what's been going on.
Well, let's do this. Let's open it up to the audience for some questions. Again, come to the mic, identify yourself, that you work for TELUS, you work for Rogers, you work for Bell, and ask these guys some questions.
Hi, my name is Rodrigo Madriz. I work with TELUS.
Cheers.
He was joking.
Tell Darren and Joe we didn't bash them much at all.
No worries, it's all good. So, Tony, you mentioned something about capital. So the key question that I will have for both of you would be, when will you be needing more cash?
When?
Yeah.
And how much?
Are you offering?
Just a question.
Look, I mean, it's a continuous, not dissimilar to TELUS. It's an ongoing effort to, to optimize the capital and get as much as possible, as cost effectively as possible, so we can accelerate the rollout. So the answer is we need it right now. We need it every day. But I wouldn't have got into the business without financial partners that can go the distance. And similar to Alec, we have both of us really are in a position where we can really go the distance, which is what's necessary to make the big guys clear to the big guys that we're not going to get pushed around. We're not going to get squeezed out. So we're here for the long haul, and you got to get used to it.
Yeah, I think my answer would be similar. We're always in need of more capital, and at the right price, we'll take more. But we haven't actually gone to the street looking for money for like over a year. We did our money, and we got ourselves to the point where we had a fully funded business plan, and we started building. Now, will we want more money? No question. Will we want to go after 700 megahertz? No question. So it's an ongoing battle.
That's a good question. Yep.
Hello, Christopher Emery with Cisco Systems. Question about the 700 megahertz auction coming up. Let's suppose for a minute that the foreign ownership restrictions are relaxed and foreign capital's able to flow into Canada. And let's suppose that there are some new entrants beyond yourselves who bid for 700 megahertz. I'm just wondering if you gentlemen have an opinion about how many networks the country can take. I appreciate some of them are regional networks, but at some point we seem to have an awful lot of networks, or is that, what are your views on that? Thank you.
I think a consolidation has to take place. I think even where we're at today, there's probably places where Tony has a tower and I have a tower right next to him. And so I think consolidation is good. I think the folks at Industry Canada are very bright, and I think there's some people there that will come up with a structure and they'll stage the foreign ownership changes that they want to make when they want to make them in a way that allows existing players to grow, still gives foreigners an opportunity. But there's no question that we don't want a fragmented new entrant base. If I was still at Bell or Rogers, I would want to see a continued fragmented new entrant base. Their nightmare is that, Tony and I go out for more drinks after this and decide to merge, and we convince the guys at Mobilicity to do it, and now you've got a real force. And so I think as well as setting aside new spectrum in the 700 megahertz band, they need to find a way to facilitate consolidation, because that becomes sustainable competition.
Okay. Let's move over to the mic here. Okay.
Hi, I'm JP from Ericsson. This is regarding towers again. Two really short questions. Have you guys shared any towers between yourselves? And if so, why not? And also, I know in the US, they have a lot of independent tower operators like American Tower and things like that. Why hasn't that happened in Canada, where the tower operators are separate from the telcos?
You want to go or you want
So
to?
the first question is, have you shared towers?
Yeah, no, look, there's definitely a need for us to cooperate on towers. We haven't shared anything to date, but there is definitely a need for us to do that. So that's an ongoing process for us. But on your second question, my personal view is the big guys still see the assets as strategic, and evidenced by their activity that Alec described of adding antennas on them. It's a strategic asset because they can block other guys from coming into it. There hasn't been a player like an American Tower that's come in and acquired. You'd have to acquire a mass of towers to make that business make sense. And the further new entrants get into building, the more difficult that becomes. You need to convince a Rogers or a Bell or a TELUS to sell to you on mass, and that hasn't happened. I think the guys see them as strategic assets, and they can block other guys from coming in that way.
Yeah, if they enabled an American Tower up here, or what's the other one? Crown
Castle,
Crown
American
Castle.
Tower, SBA.
If they enabled one of those by deciding to sell off the assets, and it makes really good sense. It makes really good sense. They don't need to own their towers. That's a lot of capital. But they can because they can. And if they enabled a Crown Castle, what do you think would happen the next day? They're just businessmen. they're getting a revenue stream from the incumbent they bought the towers from. They come to us and put us right on, and they don't play the games. So right now, the incumbents don't want to sell off their towers because it would enable us, because those tower companies would abide by the rules.
Just as a follow-up question, both of you guys, how many towers have you built to date, and how many do you expect to build on your current footprint?
We're approaching 1,000. Not towers, though. They're sites, right?
Rooftops, sites?
Yeah, it's mostly rooftops.
We're in Toronto and Montreal. We are probably now around 300.
On this side?
Thank you. Armen Matrosyan from Eco Carrier. My question, I guess, is to the wind on the strategy and marketing side. We all know that the battle between you guys and the big companies are basically battle for subscriber. So when Wind announced you entering to the Canadian market last year, all of us were kind of expecting a very big mobile revolution. So the only thing we have seen on our side is just unlimited plans. So if we analyze back there, we know that the cost of acquiring new customers from the big three is not only the cost of early cancellation, but also cost of subsidizing the phone from you guys. So the cost of acquiring one new customer is basically much more higher than ours. So you started to subsidize phones 1 year after the launch of your products. So my question is, why so late, and what was your strategy of customer acquisition?
So it's directed at me, right?
Yeah.
Or, yeah. Well, I mean, look, we started with approaching a certain segment of the market. We obviously started the operation with, as everyone or many in this people in this room know, we did not have the network we would want, or certainly not the network we have today. We more than doubled the number of sites from launch to today. So we've greatly enhanced coverage, and as part of doing that, now we can start to broaden our addressable market. So one way to broaden our addressable market is to start to now offer subsidies. But if you really look at the way we've structured our subsidies, it's not dissimilar to the promotions we had in the market earlier on. We've basically been offering different forms of subsidy really since the get-go by offering people the various forms of credit to try to ease the pain of that handset cost up front. And we have another one we're going to try coming up in the next couple of months, the same kind of thing, where we're basically trying to make it easier for people to afford the handset. Because we're not offering because there's no contract, we have no option but to charge people something significant for the handset. We really cannot afford to subsidize that handset in any material way, because you can just obviously take it and leave, but there's no restriction on that. So that's the issue. A lot of people in our community, on the Wind Mobile community, have said, "Hey, we'd like to sign a contract." But I'll just ask you guys. I mean, how many of you would like to sign a contract from Wind? Would anyone like to see contracts from Wind after all this effort of getting rid of contracts? How many people really want to sign contracts? There's a few people that have said that on the community, but basically people are pretty happy with unlimited, no contract. I can plan for my cell phone bill for the first time in my life. I'm not getting ripped off anymore, and there's no overages, system access fees. All these fees have been wiped out. So there's been a great simplification of the experience and a great improvement of the experience. So, and the big guys have reacted to it. Everyone's got unlimited plans now. That would never have happened if Alec and I were not. If we were not in the market, we'd all still be sitting here, with nothing like unlimited plans in the market.
You want to comment on?
I think Tony covered it all.
Next question.
Okay, I'm Melody Adhemi from Plastic Mobile, and my question comes from a purely consumer and frustrated consumer perspective. And I heard one of you mention earlier that you're tired of being bullied around, and well, as consumers, we're tired of being bullied around. But the only caveat here, and the only thing that I have to bring up, is that just like you don't want to give up your BlackBerry, we don't want to give up our iPhones. Yeah. More importantly, we don't want to give up the opportunity at the next Z phone. What is it that you guys can do, or what are you guys going to be able to offer consumers, or at least what kind of promises can you guys put forward so that we as consumers can feel confident giving up our contracts and coming over?
Well, look, mine will be a real short answer. We are very, very clear on who we're targeting. You're not, I'd say most of the people in this room are not my target market. And so we're not trying to go up market. We're going to be, we're not even going to be fast followers. We're going to evolve our offering as our subscriber base's needs evolve. But we're going after the person who looks at the iPhone and says, you know what, it's something it's not my target. The market we're going after, it's a high ethnic population. They're under-indexed on internet. They don't have an internet connection at home. So it's a very, very different market. I think Tony is going after that youth-oriented market. And Tony?
I mean, I need help with Apple. I mean, it's not a network issue. It's entirely a device manufacturer. And that would be the answer with all the Androids and all the RIM devices as well. It all comes down to just...
I think it's important to note that the spectrum these guys have is not the same spectrum that the incumbents have.
Well, mine is.
And yours is.
Yeah.
So in order to get handsets, you've got to be willing to commit to volume and get around. So again, that's another way of keeping competition out.
Sure.
Is you got to have enough volume for a handset manufacturer to produce enough units for that spectrum band.
But it will happen. I mean, it will happen. The frequencies we have, are owned by T-Mobile in the U.S. They're buying volumes, and we have a good relationship with them already. And so it will happen. It's just, the big guys would like to hold it off as long as they possibly can, obviously, because that, we have a lot of good we have a lot more devices coming though next year. So stay tuned.
Well, let's get a couple questions. I know this gentleman's been standing up for a while, and then we'll get over here to the right.
Right. Hi, I'm Chris Vandeveld. I'm a student at the University of Waterloo. My question is, I'd seen some data on the news and in sort of enthusiast websites. It was similar to what you guys were saying. Namely, that Canada has the highest prices and lowest adoption rates out of most of the world. And sort of one of the reasons that always comes up by people trying to sort of defend this situation is that it's just that Canada is so darn big. We have this sort of a low density population, and they're saying these cell phone towers, especially.
It's a pile of crap.
It's just total crap.
Yeah, Canada's big, but our population isn't evenly spread. I mean, for example, the spectrum license we have covers Quebec and Ontario. Windsor to Quebec City is 19 million people. It's the highest density factor. I mean, people forget that the city of Toronto is the 5th largest city in North America. The density factor, when Metro PCS, which is one of our sister companies, launched in the US, they launched in South Florida and Miami. They didn't have anywhere near the density factor that we have in Toronto. Look around at the number of multi-dwelling units. So, look, I was around at the incumbents when we were peddling that stuff. It's a pile of crap. It has nothing to do with the size of this country. The reality is you keep prices high, you keep the people who can't afford it out, but you extract as much as you can from the masses that do buy from you. So,
okay. The sort of second part of the question is how are each of you sort of dealing with, or not necessarily that rumor, but any part of reality that there would be to that? What are each of your sort of ideas on battling that kind of stigma, and if there is a reality, sort of a low density?
Well, I mean, I say one stat on that, and that is that in Canada, over 85% of the population lives within just under 4% of the landmass. So, what are we really having to cover?
yeah. And look, what we're doing, both Tony and I have launched unlimited plans. Not a single incumbent launched an unlimited plan until after we did. Not a single one. Chatter launched after even us. And so I sort of look at it and go, we've delivered unlimited to the country. We've all added tons and tons of subscribers, and so have the incumbents. So penetration is going up. You haven't seen any one of the incumbents' numbers go down and report a net negative quarter, not because of anything we're doing. And so I sort of look at it and go, I think we're doing our part by bringing prices down.
Let's move over to the right. Great question.
Hi, I'm David Michaels from MNext. My question's about mobile commerce, and I know you have a fixed price contract. Do you have a program, some way to enable m-commerce, so I can write apps and people can put your SIM cards into my phones or any phone they have and run an app and buy something? Is it through separate billing or on, I don't know how you want to do it, but have you thought about that? Does that come across the table?
Yeah, I think it's something that you're going to see us do. It's not something that's in the sort of real near term, like in the course of the next 12 months. And again, we're focused at Public Mobile on a simple talk text data model starting early next year, along with roaming. I think as you start to see more smart devices, more Android-based touchscreen devices, you'll see us start to look at that. Right now, it's not core to our offering.
Okay. And what about on wind?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, we're definitely taking an approach of looking at these things perhaps in a different light than Alec, but we do not have anything definitive on this area. What I'm personally doing is spending a considerable amount of time with the Canadian payments industry, and there's a lot going on that you may be familiar with. It's all going to be on the public record. A lot of it is already. That there is a big consultation going on as to how personal privacy laws and security issues obviously are the two big things. And they're really trying to avoid another scenario where, like with internet banking, it took several years for Canadians to be comfortable, using internet banking and making payments online. There's that whole wave of issues that are going to come up now for mobile, and so there's a lot of consultations going on in the government. I'm personally involved in that and trying to prevent the big guys from locking it all up, which is what they're trying to do. Between the banks and the big mobile carriers, there's a nice tight group forming.
Right. Well, Rogers is offering a 70-30 split. I think it's a little rich for them, but.
We'll see how it unfolds. Right now, it's all about the big banks and the big telcos, in a big love-in.
Okay, we're going to take 3 more questions, 1, 2, and then 3. So go ahead with the blue
My name is
shirt.
Daniel. I work for Bell Mobility. Don't hold that against me. I noticed they weren't one of the sponsors. Basically, my question is, you both kind of mentioned different demographics that you're going for. When it comes to your demographics, when is it that you would look at an analytical trend, such as something similar to Google Analytics or what they use on YouTube? And when would you follow what Jay-Z, for example, talks about in the latest Forbes 400, just kind of following your gut when it comes to trends?
I'm not sure if I totally understood the question, but you mean the changes in data use?
Yeah, so just when it comes to understanding your demographics. So
well, sorry, I may as well just take a shot at that. In our case, I mean, there's enormous, obviously, growth in month-over-month usage of data is just exploding as people realize, that they are not going to get some massive upcharge. Right? People just don't even believe our tariff for a while. So they get their bill 3 or 4 times where they actually believe, it actually is unlimited. And then you can see their usage just go up beyond belief. And most of it is driven, 60% of it or so is driven by Facebook, right off the top. And it's just all photos, photos flying all over the place. And Facebook and Google searches. And Google, Facebook and YouTube are 85% of the data. And that's that trend is continuing. This corporate email is already small. No one cares. It'll stop working.
Did that address your question?
Yeah, it was kind of more along the lines of when would you follow analytics, like Google, or looking at your numbers of sales and consumers, and when would you just follow your gut and say, I should launch this campaign?
Oh, sorry, I didn't understand you. I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
So we're, you're from Bell Mobility. I would say 50% of my marketing department is from Bell Mobility. And so we have a lot of work we've done in terms of pre-wiring. And we have the luxury of having started with a clean slate. So we've pre-wired the entire organization. And in fact, the folks on the IT and customer experience side have a lot of marketing background. So we've pre-wired the entire IT systems to be able to pull all that data and analytics. And it's not sometimes as simple as, this is the right offer to target to this demographic or this ethnic community. Sometimes it's about the day and the month that they pay, how they're paying, is it cash or is it PAC, and going through all of that. So we're spending a lot of time on that. In fact, I would argue we probably have some tools that we can't, we're not getting a chance to really use yet because we're just getting to that critical mass. But I think we have some tools you'd probably be envious of.
I mean, so yeah, now I know the question. I understand the question. It's a massive part of our business too, and I've been in the long distance business and home phone business, internet business, long distance business, especially for 12 years, and so we do a massive amount of analysis on what each subscriber's behavior is and how their behavior is changing, and what we can do to further upsell, to move them over, to reduce credit risk, reduce fraud risk, all kinds of stuff like that. Yeah, I would say we're really very advanced in that area.
Next question. Okay, over here. Then we'll have a final question.
Hello, my name is Silvana. I'm Apollo Studio, which is a creative studio for mobile content. My question is a little less elaborate than the other ones. So just more like an idea. If it has been so hard to make the big guys to follow the rules, why don't you try supporting on the community in order to make them do it? Like, I mean, I'm fairly new to Canada, and I have seen that the community is really concerned about the antennas and the like rooftop antennas and the towers. So why don't you try, going to the community and say, hey, we don't want to build more towers. Why don't you, build a plan to support on the community to make them comfortable?
Look, it's a very good suggestion, and we've tried to do some of that. The problem is the length of time it takes to get the community to actually act, and then, quite frankly, if it was politicians that could change things very quickly, you could get people in a community to get them to move because they're voters. But guys that run large corporations like the incumbents, they can ignore. I remember once hearing, I was reasonably young and junior in one of the firms, and a very senior guy said, "What do you mean? It's not the customer we have to keep happy." I said, what? It's not the customer you got to keep happy. It's the regulator. We're a monopoly. The regulator decides when we can raise prices, and so you got to keep the regulator happy. The customer doesn't get a chance to input on that. And so I think I'd love to do something like that. I think it's a great suggestion, but I think it would take us too long. And so instead, we all have a time to market. We spent the money to buy the spectrum. Now we got to get the towers up. And so we decide, let's work with the incumbents. If we can't, well, boom, let's just build our own towers. And that's what we've all chosen to do. So I think it's a good suggestion. I think it's something that we probably need to think about. Thank you.
Maybe the sooner you start, the sooner you get it. So maybe you get to build half of towers, and then at the end of the half of the towers, you.
No, it's a great idea. I agree with Alec. It's a great idea, and we.
If you're willing to put an activist group together, I'll back you. How's that? Cheers.
It's a great question. Final question over here, please.
Thank you, Jeff. Focusing on towers again, I'm wondering if you have any plans, the way that Catalyst does, to open up APIs to any developer communities that are out here in Toronto. Of course, we have a lot here, and focusing especially on public mobile, and knowing that your target demographic is coming from other countries and new entrants to Canada, would be more open to mobile marketing initiatives as they do have them in other countries. So basically, if there's any plans for you to open up APIs to developers.
I can't tell you that today there's a well thought through plan or an articulated strategy on that. I can tell you though that as recently as yesterday I was having a conversation with one of our board of directors, and it's not lost on us that the movement towards an open network is, I think, going to be the key differentiator between us, and that's something that I think we all need to explore. I think that you look at what Google is doing. You look at all of these large entities that are saying it's got to be about open standards and an open network. So I would say to you there's a real strong leaning towards that. And I say that because it makes good business sense. Because as we try to differentiate ourselves, we have to harness the masses. We have to harness folks like you that are going to find some way to potentially differentiate our network. So yes, there's a movement towards it, but are we there yet? No, there's still a lot of work.
Good question. In closing, and Tony, we'll start with you. If you had one message to send to the incumbents, what would it be?
Heads up.
Okay. Alec?
Look, we're here to stay. I think it's, like Tony's heads up. I think we're here to stay, and I don't think that, success for us is mutually exclusive with long-term success for the incumbents. I think we can coexist. I think we're going after a different segment, and we can consolidate that segment, and we can all grow. I think there's times that they, expect that somehow they're going to bully us or scare us, and we're going to just run away, and I don't think it's going to happen. I think what they might do is cause us to sort of say, hey, there's a hell of a lot of really good reasons that we should be spending a lot more time working together. And so, they want us to stay fragmented, but they're being such bullies that I think we should probably look at teaming up and creating a larger entity, because, while we go after slightly different markets, I think we're complementary in the way we do things, and the spirit of each firm is very similar, even though Tony is, one of Canada's quintessential entrepreneurs, and I was just a corporate hack, but, we're sort of addressing it all the same way.
So we'll close in on prognostications or predictions for 2011. Any closing comments? If you had to pick one thing for 2011.
One thing for 2011. There's three of us new entrants sort of in this area. I think one of the three gets consolidated, and I'd love to see all three get consolidated.
Okay.
Yeah, I concur with that. We got to work together. We got to work together.
So marriage is in the works somehow.
There's some courting going on.
Okay,
Yeah.
good enough. Jim, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Let's give these guys a big hand.
Thank you.
When we set up this event, and I asked Jeff to come up from Texas to moderate the event because he did a great job at the start of the year for our February event, I said, you know, one thing I'll promise you, it will be very colorful. So I think it was that tonight. So thank you, Tony and Alec, first time out. Great to meet you, and you did a great job. And Jeff, thanks as always. Fantastic discussion and great questions from the audience. That closes off the event for this year. Our next event will be February, and we'll do the same event as we did last year, which was an analyst panel, which talks about forecast for the upcoming year, what we expect to see, et cetera. And it was a pretty popular event last year, so hopefully we'll see a lot of the same faces out. So big round of applause for Jeff and Alec and Tony.
Thank you.